What's going on, Chooms? JonJonTheWise here, and I got another Cyberpunk video for you guys. This time we're going to be talking about my home brews that I use in my own games throughout the years. Cyberpunk Red has come out. It's been out for quite some time now, and I think that I have enough homebrew items to be able to make a video on the subject. But before we get into that, make sure you guys join our Discord community. The link is in the description below. Make sure you guys follow me on social media at JonJonTheWise everywhere, and subscribe to Tabletop Cyberpunk, an audio podcast where I usually upload videos and I do interviews and such, so you can be listening to the things that I have on the commute. And last but not least, if you want to support this channel, the best way you can do that, other than liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing the channel, is also to join the Patreon. Patreon.com/JonJonTheWise is the best way to support this channel. I really appreciate all you chooms that help me out. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you guys do. All right, let's get into the video. Now, if you're watching this, you might notice that some things have changed around me. I got a 3D printer back here. I got a new desk, and sometimes change can be hard and change can be difficult to get through. But other times changes can be good. As you can see, I'm enjoying this kind of change. And that's what the essence of homebrew really is. It's the idea of changing things that are not working for you or making things work for a better experience. I think there's no shame in keeping rules as written. And in fact, I've kind of leaned into that category a little bit more throughout the years, and I've really enjoyed my experience. As I've said in past videos, if you want to check out Homebrew versus Raw with Binary Dragon, that is a great conversation that we have about this subject. But I've learned that playing through rules as written, it's given me better insight on how I can properly balance my homebrew items if I'm very familiar with the rules. So for all of you rules as written choombas out there, don't worry. I'm with you. I support you. This is a video for folks that want some changes and some insight and some ideas of things that they can do within their game to have their own kind of fun. So the first item of homebrew, you guys might have seen this if you've seen any of the actual plays that I've done, is called rolling under luck. Now, when you guys do a death save in Cyberpunk Red, what you do is you roll a d10 and you hope that the result is under your body stat. And that's how you basically do death saves in Cyberpunk Red. Well, taking that same philosophy and also taking some philosophies from Cyberpunk 2020, I've decided to use the luck stat in something more than just a resource for helping your skill checks. Now, the way that it works is you take 1d10, you roll it, and you hope the result is under your luck stat. Now, when would you use this? This I've used many times, and it's mostly just for fun and for narrative issues, and it's also helped us move the plot along. Think of this idea. What if you're a nomad, you have a vehicle, and you get to a station, and I say, hey, you guys have been driving for a long time, and you've run out of gas, or you're running out of gas. One of my players asked me, well, do I have like an extra canister of gasoline? That's not something that's really made in character creation. That's something that you have to buy as gear and those kinds of items. But I think to myself logically, if this guy has a nomad character, then he's likely going to have a canister of gasoline extra in the trunk of the car. Now, how do we determine that? Do I just give it to them? No, I'd like for them to work for it a little bit. Maybe they luckily left it in their trunk. And that's the whole concept of the idea, is luck comes into play in some of the things that we do in our everyday life. Luckily, you place the keys where they're supposed to be, so the next day when you're looking for them, you know exactly where they are. And that's basically the essential idea of this luck check. So if they pass the test, then I give them that extra little thing. If they fail the test, then I let them know, you're not lucky enough. Unluckily, you didn't leave that extra canister in your trunk when you usually do. And of course, the next time we get to town, the player's going to tell you, I put a canister of gasoline in the trunk. Okay, next up, let's talk about rolling under cool. It's the same kind of concept mechanically as rolling under your luck stat, but this time you roll under your cool stat. Now, why would you use this? This is for narrative situations mostly, and sometimes I'll even give my players a +1 bonus if they pass this test. But let's say, for example, they want to do something really cool, like jump over a car, slide under another car. Like, I can just go around and do a bunch of athletics checks, or I can tell them, hey, why don't you roll under your cool stat, and let's see if your character is cool enough to have been able to do something like that. So if they have a really high cool, it helps them in that manner. Let me give you an example. One of my players once said, I want to casually walk up to this guy and kick him through a window. Now, that's obviously something a cool guy would do, is casually walk up to someone and kick them through a window. But what would that mean mechanically? There's stealth checks, there's perception checks, there's evasion, there's brawling, there's all these things, but that really bogs down the rule of cool factor in the game. Instead, what I do is I say, okay, roll under your cool stat, and if you pass, then yeah, you definitely are able to do that. They're not able to dodge out of the way. You kick them through the window. If they fail, then everybody looks at you. You look like an idiot. They know what you're trying to do. The guy easily dodges out of the way, and in fact, he might even throw you out the window. So that's the risk and reward of doing these kinds of skill checks. Alternatively, I might also say, okay, you passed your cool check. I'm going to give you a +1 to whatever skill check you were trying to perform after that. For example, one of my characters once was flirting with an NPC, and they said, I want to coolly grab a drink without looking from one of the passing waiters and serve the drink to the person while locking eyes with them. Now, if you're cool and you pass, you do exactly that. You don't have to do an athletics check. But if you fail, then I'll say do an athletics check at a -2, or you automatically fail an athletics check. You smack the waiter in the face by accident, and they spill all the drinks all over the place on top of you and the NPC, completely failing that flirt encounter. Next up, let's talk about adding additional damage to weapons. Now, I've toyed with this kind of thing. I've looked at auto fire, I've looked at single shot, I've thought about bringing burst fire back into the scene, but ultimately, I've tried this thing, and it seems to have not broken the game completely and has added some fun new elements to it. So what you do is you take a weapon, like let's say a heavy pistol, that's a 3d6 rate of fire to weapon, and you say this is a Malorian Arms DBR 50, and it does 3d6 +4. So the minimum damage for that weapon has gone completely up. It's no longer a 3 damage item per bullet. It is now up to 7 damage per bullet minimum, which is really awesome. It's a cool way to give a weapon a kind of unique flavor and to make it different from all the other ones. And also, I've used this for like heavy weapons. If it's like an auto cannon, items in the game like assault rifles do 5d6. We know explosives do 6d6, but there's an in between where it's not a rifle and it's not an explosive, but it's a really big round that maybe even be more powerful than an explosive like a grenade. So what do we do with that? Well, we'll do 5d6 +8, 5d6 +5, +3. It's all up to you and what you decide is going to be the right numbers for the situation. But that always adds a unique thing to the game where the players don't know what they're going to come up against, and it's also great ways to give your players additional loot in the game. Now, is this a foolproof thing? No, of course, there's probably going to be some OP builds out there that are going to take major advantage of this, but these are items that I give my players outside of character creation. We go through the campaign, they kill a boss, the boss has this crazy vibro katana on them that does this crazy amount of damage, and now the player has it. So it's definitely like a player progression type of weapon to help them through combat situations through the campaign. Next up, local expert the skill. Now, if you look at the local expert skill, the way it's designed is you take the skill and you pick a location, and then you become the expert of that location, the place that you call home, or the local area that you know about. I have made this more of a skill that is a general local expert of the area. So that way, if your character is coming from another campaign, or narratively your character grew up in a different part of town or this part of town, I can determine how high that level of expertise will be. And I don't want you to be an expert of Night City and then you come and you play in my game, which takes place in Texas, and all of a sudden that local expert that you put 6 points in means absolutely nothing. So the way that I like to play it is I like for all of my players to have a local expert skill, and that is going to determine how well they know the area around them. If if they're from the place that the characters are playing, then I might actually give them 2 extra points in that skill, just that character creation, because I'm like, yeah, you're an expert of the area. This will make things more logically make sense when you're doing skill checks. Now, remember, I've done all kinds of videos on what the difference is between local expert and streetwise. If you check out my skills video, I actually talk about how the two are different from each other. So I would take a look at those and you can determine which of those 2 skills can work perfectly for you. All right, the next one is a really small, minor one. It's just something that I threw in the game because I wanted to throw my players a little bit of a bone. But it's 1d6 healing outside of any speed heal or hospital healing. Whatever the rules is written is, in addition to that, you get 1d6 healing per day, once per day, if you just rest and relax. So it gives my players a chance to narratively sit down, tend to their wounds, have a little bit of chatter, and maybe grab something to eat. And I determined that, that all helps with the healing process of getting better. So it's not going to significantly heal you unless you roll maybe a 6. But, 1d6 on average is going to give you a little bit of more of a boost throughout the day. All right, next up is excessive damage causing a stun save. Stun saves are something that were from Cyberpunk 2020, and they removed it from Cyberpunk Red because it was one of those things that just bogged down the game with crunch, like, hit locations, and then you had stun saves and stuff like that. But the idea behind stun saves are great. It's the idea that you took so much damage that you might have lost your footing and you've fallen on your face. So it's just like a kind of realism simulator. Now, I don't usually do stun saves in Cyberpunk Red, but if I determine that the players did a giant amount of damage to an NPC, or they took a giant amount of damage, I'm talking like 25 plus damage, then I might have them roll a resist torture drugs to see if they are able to withstand the pain and the velocity of the round or attack. Next up is something I've seen a lot of people do is not do any death saves for NPCs. That's definitely something that I do, unless it's a big important boss, like a last level kind of boss thing. Then yeah, I'll do a death save because it adds to the narrative. It's like, oh my god, you guys threw everything you had at him, but he kept saving his death save and he got out of there safely. But for like low level mooks and stuff like that, if their HP hits 0, they're goners, and I don't really want to waste time rolling death saves for them. Next up, I've introduced critical successes and critical failures. Now, that's not existent in this game in the way that we're used to. In Cyberpunk 2020, there was a fumble chart when you rolled a 1, which determined a lot of bad things that would happen to you, like a grenade falling at your feet, or you hit your buddies, or with your stray bullets and stuff like that. And even in games like D&D, we have rolling a 1 or a natural 20, meaning really, really amazing things. But in Cyberpunk Red, it was determined that a 10% chance, which is what a 1 out of 10 chance is for failing something critically, is a little bit too high for a D10 game. So they've just decided to take critical successes and failures pretty much out of the game. And it's like, you could still succeed even though you rolled a 1, and you can definitely you just super pass, and that doesn't mean anything if you critically hit 2 10s in a row. Well, I didn't really like that, and I've tried many things. What I've generally determined is if the result of a roll is 5 or below, that it is a critical failure, and if a result of a roll is 25 or higher, then it is a critical success. Now, this is all just narrative. There's no double damage, there's no free critical injury or anything like that. This is just my way of giving my players a little bit of a reward narratively for doing the thing that they were supposed to. If you roll a 27 when you're persuading somebody, then that person is engulfed by whatever you're saying. They're enthralled by whatever you're saying. So that's it. I'm just going to give it to my player. They rolled a 27. It has to be a critical success. Inversely, if there is a 4 or a 3 result, I've even seen negative results from my players, and we're just sitting there thinking, like, shouldn't this mean something when there's a negative result, you know? And that's where critical failures always make sense. And I've used this homebrew in those situations, and the players all think to themselves, like, yeah, it makes sense. I got a -2 on my roll. Of course I broke something, you know, significant with this skill check. So toy around with that, toy around with the numbers, and see what works for you guys. All right, next up is a lore tidbit, and that is cars. Cars and their availability is actually almost nothing in Cyberpunk Red. If you look at the pricing for vehicles, the idea is they're so hard to find that you're not going to be able to afford one. You know, obviously with more DLCs and supplements coming down the road, we're going to see more options for edge runners and for regular folks to get vehicles, because, you know, humanity always finds a way. But for now, with what we have in the core rulebook, cars are a scarcity item. We're living in a kind of post-apocalyptic cyberpunk. It's an in-between period where the lore says that last corporate war really shook things up, and there's like a real scarcity with items. Obviously, if you played Cyberpunk 2077, you know that we eventually get back to the 2020 glory days, maybe even more, with the availability of things out there. But for now in Cyberpunk Red, that's not the case. In my games, though, it is the case. I don't want to play in that kind of universe. I think it's detrimental to the fun. It's detrimental to the way people enjoy playing Cyberpunk. So when they're in cities, there's cars, and they can steal cars, and they can drive cars, they can buy cars. I like for them to be available. I like for them to be differently priced, and for some to be affordable while other ones are luxurious. So that's definitely something that I introduce. Now, what does that mean for the Nomad? Not much, really. The Nomad still has their vehicle. They just don't really have to work as hard as anybody else for it, and they can get upgrades more easily than anybody else. So that's what I think makes Nomads more important, is you can just right off the bat have a really powerful Nomad with a cool car. All right, next up is the 3 Goon Method. I'm sure you guys have probably seen that video. If you haven't, people out there like it. You know, it's not a crazy new concept. I actually took the combat number concept from drones and demons, I believe, and basically implemented that into 3 sets of NPCs, where easy, medium, and super hard, or elite. And those 3 are the levels of these NPCs in combat. I make 1 roll for each one of them, and that determines whether they pass or fail the skill check. There's all types of ways for anybody to do things. I found this 3 Goon Method moves combat along really quickly. I don't have to make stat blocks. I can just on the fly, if there's a combat situation, all I need is a scratch paper and we're going. I don't need to know, you know, what do they have in handgun? What do they have in evasion? What do they have in blah, blah, blah? I could just make 1 general number and we'll make a general result from the different things that they do. Next up, police response. According to the game, when you have a lawman, the lawman will do a backup roll, and basically if they pass, then they roll 1d6, and that's how many rounds it will take for the police backup to arrive in time. And that actually, if you think about it, at the max, it'll be 18 seconds for help to arrive, which is crazy fast if you think about it in real life, but is crazy slow in terms of combat, where combat are 3-second rounds. That's where I got that number. You roll a 6 on the result, that's multiplied by 3 seconds per round. That means it takes 18 seconds for the police to get there. And we all know 6 rounds in Cyberpunk Red is a really, really long combat situation. That's like over an hour of combat in my experience. So we're in this weird place where, you know, a narrative number for the time of their arrival versus a mechanical level doesn't really match up all that well. And if you change change it, then you're kind of changing what makes the lawman what the lawman is. So instead, I do, half the time. I do 1d3 instead of 1d6, and that's when the police arrive. They arrive even sooner. And this has always worked for me. The police, if they're coming, the players need to know a sense of urgency. So if they're not coming within 3 rounds, there is no sense of urgency. The combat is taking far too long. In my experience, 5 or 6 rounds is the maximum amount of combat that goes on with players that are making really hardcore characters. Even non-hardcore characters. I just did a one-shot adventure where people used pre-generated characters, and the big bad was dead within 3 rounds. So obviously there was some tuning I could have done to make it more of a exciting combat encounter, but that's just the reality of Cyberpunk Red combat, in my opinion. It is fast and it's deadly and it doesn't last very long, so we need to appropriately adapt to it. So in conclusion, the police in my game come a lot sooner. They come and there has to be a sense of urgency. So my players will feel that they're coming in 1d3 rounds instead of 1d6. And the last thing on this list is the economy of Cyberpunk Red. If you have seen my economy video with James Hutt, then you know that a lot of folks in the Cyberpunk community have a lot of questions about the economy and how it works. The way that the game is set up is a trade economy. There are fixed pricing for items. A $500 assault rifle is worth $500 everywhere, even though it's used, because of the scarcity problem that's going on in Cyberpunk Red. The idea that you have an assault rifle in the first place is what makes it so amazing. It's not that whether it's broken or doesn't work or is used or brand new. None of those things matter. There's quality that will change it. If it's a poor quality thing, then obviously it'll be determined that it's cheaper. If it's excellent quality, then it's a little bit more expensive. And there are fixed prices for everything. In my games, personally, I like to use those fixed prices as a guideline of plus or minus around that area is what this thing is worth. What's it been through? What kind of condition is it in? Forget about poor quality, medium quality, excellent quality. I'm not talking about anything mechanically. I'm just talking about whether this thing is repairable. Is it something that is going to break within its first 3 uses? Is it something that is scarce? Is it a luxury brand? Is it a very powerful weapon? These are all things that determine the price of an item, and it's not just the category that the item is in. So I like to be flexible with the economy and use the various pricing as just points of reference for my own homebrew. And I found major success with it. I've seen that my players, they can relate with it, because when you go to the store, you see 4 different types of sugar on the shelf, and you know exactly why most of the sugars are different quality. You see the generic store brand is the cheapest one up to whatever bougie sugar is out there. I don't know why I chose sugar as an example. But yeah, that's basically it, Chooms. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope you guys enjoyed my insight on homebrew items. I know this video is a little long, but it had a lot of stuff, and I just kept adding things little by little as we went on throughout my life. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys work it out. Definitely let me know your various homebrews in the comments. I love to hear from the community. And if there's anything that you guys really liked, let me know in the comments as well. I love connecting. So thank you. Have an amazing year. We'll see you guys next year. Thank you for all the support, all the care, all the love. You Chooms are amazing. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope you all have happy games. All right? Take care. Bye.